We are continuing our coverage of the major breaking news on the international front. This is a look at Jerusalem and Washington as the United States and Israel have launched an attack on Iran. President Trump confirming on his social media, Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is dead. Khamenei was killed in a massive joint military operation between the US and Israel. Meantime, we know dozens of ballistic missiles have been launched in the region by Iran towards Israel and neighboring nations that host US assets. With me now is Johnathan Panikoff, former U.S. intelligence officer, director of the Atlantic Council's Scowcroft Middle East Security Initiative. Johnathan, good evening and thank you for your time here on CTV News Channel. Reports coming in right now of President Trump confirming on his social media that Iran's supreme leader is dead. What do you make of that statement and the impact of that?
Look, I don't think the president would make it if there wasn't sufficient U.S. corroboration. I think there is going to be significant impact, but it's not just from the death of the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. It's also from the death of many of those who were around him. We saw the death of the IRGC chief. We saw the death of Ali Shamkhani, the longtime advisor and national security official who is heading the equivalent of the National Security Council in Iran. I think it's also about the broader leadership group and who it is now that is going to take control. Ali Larijani now, we've seen, has some control. But what is this going to mean long term? In other words, can, frankly, the United States and Israel get to the second, third tier of leadership, or the hardliners going to be able to coalesce and keep power ultimately?
Let's talk about the goals and the agenda. The objective here, Jonathan, as the president put it very clearly, they had three main goals. A, of course, taking out this regime, change of regime. B, the nuclear program, and C, the missile program that Iran really has. How close do you think U.S. and Israel are now at the moment to achieving those goals with this news coming in of Khamenei now dead?
It's still going to take quite some time. So the latter two, on the nuclear program and ballistic missile program, are actually a little easier because you can quite literally count that. It's not a subjective view. How many launchers does Iran have left? How much highly enriched uranium does it have left? How many weapon sites and nuclear program sites are still up and running? That is going to still take at least a number of weeks, I would think. And that's why the president has been clear that this is not an operation of hours or limited, that it's going to take quite a bit of time. The question on the regime is fundamentally harder because there's so many variables. And if the question is ultimately, and what's desired ultimately, is for a completely different type of government, well, then you're talking about people needing to come out onto the streets and somebody either needing to switch sides or stand aside who has weapons. Right now, the regime still has significant control and significant assets. If you're talking about something in which the president ultimately says, okay, somebody's willing to give in, no nuclear program, but everything else is okay, and it can be a second or third tier person of the current regime, that's not going to meet the demand, understandably, of the many Iranian protesters, but it might give President Trump enough to claim victory, as he's always wanted to do.
Yeah, that's a possibility of claiming that victory soon. But Jonathan, I'll take a moment and bring up that statement of President on Truth Social, where he says, in part, in the last line, while concluding, he says, the heavy and pinpoint bombing, however, will continue uninterrupted throughout the week or as long as necessary to achieve our objective of peace throughout the Middle East, etc., etc. He carries on. Your take when the president says that the bombing will continue. Now, we already know in another graphic that we have on U.S. and Israel strikes, if we can bring that up, we're looking at this attack that was conducted in the early hours today, several locations that have been attacked by U.S. and Israel. We have that map here that shows us those locations, whether it is Chabahar, Minab, Shiraz, Isfahan, which was struck earlier as well, or other areas within Tehran and Iran. My question to you being, when the president says for a week this will continue, how do you think that attack or that course this week is going to look like, Jonathan?
I think it's going to be fairly intense and fairly dangerous. And I think what it fundamentally means, and the first map showed it, is the reality that it's not just U.S. strikes or Israeli strikes on Tehran. It's throughout the country from north to south. They're trying to get at and achieve all of the remaining objectives from the nuclear program, the ballistic missile program, and, of course, regime leadership, as we've seen. That's going to take a sustained campaign. And so I think if it happens in a week, I actually would argue that's probably optimistic of the president. The other part of this, though, is what Iran's response is, because already Iran has very quickly, frankly, escalated this in a way that I think has surprised some of us in attacking the Gulf states. And it can say that it's attacking U.S. forces, it's attacking U.S. bases, but what the Gulf states, who desperately wanted to stay out of this, are very much saying is, absolutely not. They started the day very much in favor of no strikes and upset with the U.S., and they're ending it very upset with Iran.
Right. Okay, we'll leave it at that for tonight. Johnathan Panikoff, appreciate your time and your expertise. Thank you for joining us on CTV News Channel.